first, let's get to 3 examples of how they spend other people's money. The other people's money being you, and being a Monday. Most people, of course, you work for the government on a Monday and a Tuesday, depending on how much you earn. It could be into a Wednesday, maybe Thursday, if you happen to be particularly lucky. Well, this one involves the Greens. Now, you may well have heard some of this detail, but some of the stuff you haven't heard is just a wowzer. Now, as we know, the Greens are more pure than anyone in the Australian Parliament.
This is a government that's prepared to waste billions and billions of dollars.
The government can take these billions of dollars and build a nuclear submarine or 2.
This government wastes billions. That is a waste of public money.
This project, which is being funded with Australian taxpayers' money.
Clearly a massive waste of money.
Every cent that can be spent should be spent on the Australian public, on lifting those up who cannot lift themselves, on making the welfare safety net stronger than ever before. Unless, of course, they want to spend money on themselves. Now, the Greens have fewer members of federal parliament than they did after the 2022 election. Remember, 3 of their 4 lower house MPs, including the leader, gone. They've gone from 14 to 11. But you have paid for a renovation to the Greens party room. Remember, when anyone else is spending money, it's a waste of money. When it's money they are spending on themselves, it was hard to find a Green today. They didn't wish to speak. The Department of Parliamentary Staff told Senate estimates on Monday total construction costs associated with the 4th party room, $1.6 million. Now, remember, at the absolute height, 14 MPs, now down to 11. They had to renovate the room. Previously, documents released to the Senate to the Coalition's finance spokesperson, James Patterson, said the practical completion of the costs was $886,000. However, the department officials have now added in the additional numbers of $452,000, $289,000, which gets you to $1.6 million. When asked about this today, the relevant boffin was trying to find a reason as to why renovating one room in our federal parliament costs $1.6 million for 14 people to sit in. The Assistant Secretary of Property Services said that the rebuild area, which included demolition, cabling, hot and cold water connections. Now, again, you want to renovate your house, you could build an entire house for less than $1 million. Oh, you want to change one room in Parliament? 1.6. He said that there were extra considerations required for the construction projects in Parliament House because the design intent of the original architects needed to be put in place. What, a white wall? Now, again, Parliament House is a beautiful building. The party rooms are not spectacular and ornate. They're not full of Tasmanian wood. There's not the fine finishes of craftsmen and women from around the country. They are effectively concrete walls that have been painted. Skirting boards are fancy, but not 1.6. $1.6 million when they spend it on themselves are absolutely necessary. This crap has been going on for years, yet any spending anyone else does, that's wasteful, it's nasty. They're spending on themselves. Well, again, have a look at the Mirror, which I presume also got a dust up in the Greens party room. Example number 2 of other people's money, how they spend what you work too damn hard for. This is more serious, but another example about spin, and it comes from the Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister today, Richard Marles. Now, I won't bore you with the details, but essentially all of the different parts of the Defence Department that are about buying stuff are all now going to be pushed into one organisation. Apparently there will be no significant job losses, maybe a boss here and a boss there. And here is the Defence Minister explaining why all of this somehow is going to save us money.
This is one of the most significant reforms to defence that we have seen. It will greatly change the way that defence operates. It will greatly improve the quality of the defence spend. and it will make sure that as we spend more money in the defence budget, we are doing so in a way which sees programs delivered on time and on budget.
Look, we know the submarines a long time off. What about the missiles in the far north of Australia? What about the capacity for us to be able to intercept a missile if one gets sent here? Can we invest in that now? Or no, sorry, we've got to rebuild the Greens party room. And I get it, 1.6 in defence doesn't go that far, but I'd much prefer it spent on that than obviously what the Greens were doing. Now, remember, we have a situation when it comes to the Australian federal budget that for as far as the eye can see, the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, has built a system that will be in deficit for at least the next 40 years. $1 trillion in debt quickly becomes $2 trillion. But before they start giving themselves too many high fives about how much money they're saving, can I actually give you an idea about just how relatively small defence is to the Australian federal budget? This is from their own budget papers. I ain't making it up. Defence is 6% of budgetary spending. Social security and welfare is 37%. Defence is $51.5 billion a year. Social security and welfare, $291 billion. They want to get serious about truly saving the budget, but of course they won't do anything about that because they want to push that number as high as possible on social security and welfare. Why? Because of that triangle of dependence. You want people working for you, which is why even when you rearrange deck chairs on the bureaucracy of the Titanic, you don't sack anyone. It's why you find new ways to give people money that they didn't ask for. And of course, you try to create a scenario where business, the biggest client, is government. If they're serious about spending and saving money, why not a focus on some of these areas? But of course, cut is their whole way that they scare the ever-ballooning amount of people who get their hand fed by the government. And example number 3 of how they spent other people's money. Our old mate Chris Bowen. When Chris Bowen was out there trying to suck up to world leaders, demanding and hoping that Australia would get to host the next version of the climate conference that he attended, with $1 billion left aside, alas, we know it didn't work out. Well, in terms of the number of people that went on the behalf of the good Australian public, the ones who couldn't do it on Zoom had to be there in person, presumably not flying up the back of the plane. Albanese's government drops as much as $40,000 per person. 43 civil servants went. So throw on top of that the minister, the assistant minister, the side minister for this and that, the number is going to get closer to 50. The Department of Climate Change and Energy has confirmed $1.6 million. What is it with $1.6 million? $1.6 million gets people to go over to COP30. $1.6 million gets a new party room for a party that has fewer MPs than it did before the election. Indicative budgeted costs for travel, accommodation and other expenses covering 43 civil servants, including 32 from the Department of Climate Change and Energy. The back of the envelope sums gets you to $38,000 per person. Unsurprisingly, some coalition senators are noticing that this is a waste of your money.
Lots of international travel, lots of conferences. We've got the part-time energy minister. Now he's the president of COP negotiations. As I've said, Kieran, I really think that it's time for this Prime Minister to perhaps suggest that Chris Bowen stays in Turkey, does that job, and he appoints someone else.
And this was just for those people to, of course, go. Now, remember, the conference that never was and never will be in Adelaide was going to cost $1 billion. Well, of course, because they were going to do that within less than a year's time, a bit like the Commonwealth Games in Victoria, that Daniel Andrews, and who was the minister? That's right, Jacinta Allen, pulled out. There's millions of dollars in contracts which have already been signed. I don't know what for, presumably the sign writers and the pillow fluffers. I don't know what the jobs were. But the head of COP31 operations, Andrew Hutchison, told the parliamentary committee today, I'm sorry there's a lot of things I'm reading to you today, but the tape is very hard to find. Surprise, surprise. But thankfully there's a record of what they're spending. $7.5 million has already been committed to. So even though we're not getting it, we knew we weren't getting it for months and months. We knew that Turkey was the one who they preferred. No. We kept signing documents. You pay. $7.5 million. Now, all of this annoys me because in this country, we like to tell ourselves that we are so compassionate, and if somebody falls through the cracks, then we are there to take care of them. The reality, as I have told you for years now, is that that is not true. I had a moving experience when we were in Echuca on Saturday when I was talking to a local community worker at Harvey Norman about their battle for funding. That little organisation, if they don't do what they do when it comes to providing food, 50 families won't have food at all. Oh, there's $1.6 million to renovate the greens. There's $1.6 million for the travel to a COP. There's $7 and a bit million for the preparing of an event that they never got the chance to host. But the absolute truth here is that over 3 million Australians or households will run out of food this week. I know I say it a lot. I know I underline the point, but does this tell you that we've got our priorities right? Take the $1 billion, Prime Minister, that you were going to spend on the Yak Fest and give it to the charities that are actually taking care of people, like my mate in Echuca and the people, of course, involved in Food Bank. What about the information we got today from the Queensland Council of Social Services? Single parents and low-income households in Queensland are facing a bleak Christmas as cost of living pressures bite. New data. I thought we turned the corner. I thought this was all over. Of course it's not. A report by the Queensland Council of Social Services, or QCOS, shows that families with children are being hardest hit. Single parents with 2 kids in particular, their weekly budget, $227, under what they can afford. Where does that money come from? Probably a credit card. Slowly but surely that they'll pay a fraction off and they're in debt forever. Why? Because they're trying to feed their families. As for the boss of QCOS, speaking about the release of this today, people on low incomes are making impossible choices between keeping a roof over their head and feeding their children and paying for them to go to school. So you know what really pees me off? Is that, oh, well, I mean, come on, mate, come on, we've got to be architecturally, you know, the white party room of the Greens, 1.6. Oh, we've got to take a couple of dozen people with us to a conference about climate change, when presumably this could all be done remotely. We've got to have contracts for $7 million because, oh, yeah, who cares? We're not paying for it. Then they turn around and tell you that by rearranging who is making the orders for the equipment our Defence Department has, somehow they're saving us money when the actual money that needs to be saved right up at the other end. I mean, again, this joint, it's in trouble. You know it's in trouble. But too many people want to look the other way, or they get coined for looking the other way, and by that I mean they are part of that triangle, part of a system that keeps the money flowing to the bank account. And while I am somebody who is absolutely aware of how thin the line is, we all know the truly people who need the welfare, like a single mum, like a carer, you're getting 4/5 of bugger all. You're not getting $1.6 million in, what, even a decade out of the federal government. Oh, the Greens can get it for their party room. Yeah, so forgive me if I'm rather fixated on it. These people do not care, and by that I mean the political class. The ones who talk about charity, the ones who fund charity, the ones who promise to fund charity, the people that are actually filling the gap right now, yeah, let's listen to them. But all the rest of them, see ya, they're in it for themselves. Now, I'm going to surprise you with something here. You know I play poker machines, have for a long time. It is not a problem. I've never overcommitted. I've never had one of those nights, okay? But I'm just honest. This is something I've done with my mates for a long time. There's a whole bunch of young blokes that are doing the same right now. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people who end up having trouble because they end up getting caught. And I do have a very simple solution that would end problem gambling when it came to poker machines like that. But I won't be giving it to anyone anytime soon. But something interesting is happening in New South Wales. Now, this is a state that, despite the fact that the previous Liberal government promised a whole bunch of new reforms which were much closer to what the social services and then also the establishment left, who look down on people who pay poker machines, the same people who look down on people in the greyhound industry, the ones who look down on people like those on the fringes, those who like unconventional things like motorsport. You know, the snobs that are all up and in charge. Well, a decision has now been made to close a loophole that I'm surprised ever existed, let alone has existed for the best part of 20 years. And I cannot believe that there are 670 venues in all of New South Wales that have been fiddling with this loophole. Now, let me explain this to you. Now, as a person who, again, spends plenty of time in the city, plenty of times in the suburbs, plenty of times in the regions, I sort of know how the time zones work when it comes to these things. Generally speaking, most of your local pubs will be done by midnight. There are some that might have a pokey room open till 1, 2 in the morning. There are some suburban clubs which are frankly more like local casinos now. They don't even pretend to be called RSLs anymore in some of their cases. They're open till 2, 3 and, yep, even some places till 4 in the morning. But unbelievably, there are 670 venues in New South Wales where they have a licence to continue to be able to use the pokies at 4 a.m, 5 a.m, 6 a.m, 7 a.m, 8 a.m, 9 a.m. Now, again, I've had long nights and I've had good nights. I've seen plenty of people have bad nights too, but I have not seen many people playing pokies at 4 in the morning. That's something that should be, if you need it, off to the local casino. Today, the information was given as an exclusive, but was part of a campaign that the Turnbull Times has been running. The change, which may result in pushback from the powerful club and pub lobby, comes after criticism of the government's own independent advisory panel on gambling and a damning audit report which showed political pressure from the Greens and the Liberals. That was the report, not the pressure from. It also follows the state government-funded research which showed poker machine players were significantly more likely to experience harm after midnight. So thankfully, we have this loophole closed. Now, as always, many people who are fond of playing or are nervous about the people who have never played them and have judgy opinions about those who do play. And remember, the vast majority of people, they're putting in $20, 50, 100, that they're not blowing the kids' dinner. There are people that are doing that, and yes, we have to have systems in place for all of that, but in the same way that we don't ban all cars because some speed, that shouldn't be the approach when it comes to people wanting to entertain themselves or, yep, maybe even win a bit of cash. The reality is that we do have to have a conversation about the opening hours. Now, again, clubs are very different than pubs because the revenue stream that comes in, mainly from poker machines, supposedly goes back out the door to community groups. To the clubs that actually spend the money on the community groups, I don't think that they should be having their licences wound in by much more than is currently the case. Probably be done by midnight, maybe 1 o'clock, maybe 2, 3, 4 on a Friday, Saturday night, fine. Pubs, of course, are only open exclusively for commercial reasons, which means maybe you say, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Monday to Thursday, it's done at midnight. You're not up till 4 a.m. There probably should be a conversation around all of that. But there should also be the opportunity on a Friday and Saturday night when people are a little looser with their time to be able to be a little bit looser with what they choose to do. But there's a pretty obvious logic about what you should and shouldn't be able to do in the middle of the night on a Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday night, which brings us into where the gaming minister is here. Now, remember, this does not affect most pubs that are open until midnight 1 or most clubs that are open until 2, 3, 4. It's between 4 and 10 a.m. Under the law, New South Wales venues must shut down all gaming machines between 4 and 10 a.m. The 6-hour shutdown is a harm minimisation measure intended to provide players with an important break in play so patrons go home, get out of the zone and reflect upon their behaviour. As for the Greens, they want more. What a surprise. Greens gambling harm minimisation spokesperson, geez, what a fun business card this is for Kate Fairman. Or Fairman, I should say. She said the move was welcome but maintained that her bill, she wants to change the law, was more in line with what people want. Her bill would have required all pubs, all clubs to finish midnight. Now, I think that is a little bit tough, a little bit tight, particularly on Fridays and Saturdays. But that is where things may well end up going in New South Wales. Now, again, to the clubs that actually spend money helping their local community, you're always going to have an advocate in me. Increasingly, there are parts of clubland where, geez, they pay a lot of money to the people who are helping to run those clubs as opposed to these supposed community organisations. It is also extraordinary to me that organisations that have got community licence because of their commission and because of their connections to ex-service people, well, not a lot of money going towards those organisations. And I know there was big tax fights about this in the 1960s and 70s, but I think we do have to have a chat about this because I want a vibrant club industry that does have discounted food, does employ locals, does give money to local kids, but I'm not all that keen on the local casino that doesn't even have RSL or diggers in its name anymore, that's allowed to stay open till 3 o'clock in the morning and is paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to the brass who help run the local casino. That seems more like a local casino than a community club. Anyway, send your complaints, paul@skynews.com.au. Now, we of course learnt when it came to COVID that one of the dumbest things that the people who claim to know better than all of us have done, which was to pull kids out of school. Now, of course, this was all about a safe working environment, and then it was about, oh, hang on, you might end up giving Nana something. The reality is that pulling a generation of kids out of school traumatised the very young, caused massive issues with teenagers, and we are going to have problems for a long time to come. So could somebody please explain to me what is the idea being pushed in New South Wales where some kids are going to be told, don't come to school because it's going to be hot tomorrow? Now, again, if there is a fire in your local government area, if your school is under threat from a fire, then it would make obvious sense, no, it's not going to open tomorrow. Why? Because we want the kids to be close to home. But that's not what I'm talking about here. In New South Wales, they have a thing called catastrophic fire warnings, when essentially, if there's a fire, it will be massive. Why? Because of the winds, because of the temperature. That is the level that I think also exists in many other states. Well, now, even when there is no fire within 50 k's of the school might be closed. Now, what a working parent is supposed to do on those days, who knows? But parents in New South Wales are being warned that schools will be forced to close on days of elevated bushfire risk. Again, not because there is a fire, but because there might be a fire. This is ridiculous. Again, if one is burning close enough to property and you've got an hour to move kids, I understand the urgency. But because the Bureau says tomorrow might be Armageddon, and how many times they often make that warning, well, the idea, take the kids out of school. I mean, also, what a dopey idea if there happens to be any kids that end up on the edges of these fires. That has happened in the past. Last Wednesday, 26 public schools across New South Wales' Central West and Riverina areas were made non-operational. Why? State's Education Department said bang due to weather conditions. So what do you reckon the bureaucrats who told us no one outside because there is COVID for months and months and months, the same people who said no, the best way to stop deaths on our roads is nobody drives on our roads, is now going to be the scenario here. Now again, we all want our kids to be safe, and I am not playing fast and loose with anyone's safety. But the idea that because there might be a fire, the kid definitely doesn't go to school doesn't square for me. Love to know what you think, paul@skynews.com.au. We'll continue, though. A statement, the New South Wales Education Department said the decision to move on a school site was to be non-operational was not being taken lightly. Oh, thanks. But 26 of them. Again, not because there were fires, but because there were weather conditions that might have made fires terrible. Decision-making around bushfire risk is informed by ensuring the safety of our students and staff is made in consultation with emergency services. So again, a little bit of arse covering here. We don't have to worry if they're not at school and school's been shut down. The Department of Education works closely with the Rural Fire Service to make sure that decisions are based on the latest information available and communicated with school communities the day before they need to take action. One school in the Riverina used last week's catastrophic declaration. Remember, not fire, just a warning of the conditions that if there was a fire, things would get out of control. One school in the Riverina used last week's catastrophic declaration to warn parents that if further high-risk days were forecast, it would close to ensure the safety of staff and students and the wider community. Well, what is the connection to the wider community? Our school is in a bushfire-prone zone and is identified as Category 2 on the New South Wales Department of Education's bushfire register, the note that went home to kids said. The fire danger ratings do not mean that there will be a bushfire. Instead, they indicate that weather conditions pose a high risk if a fire were to start. The idea, clear the decks, there might be a fire. I understand clear the decks because there's a fire, but there might be a fire? Come on. That's odd. Can you know what you think about that? Let's get to While You Were Working, our nightly look at how Showbiz for Ugly People works. Where not only do you have to work, then they piddle their money up against the wall, your money, on new party rooms for the Greens. Well, they've got a staffer to make themselves look good on social media, like this bunch of Victorian Labor MPs.
Hey, teach me how to do it, hey.
Or the Minister for Freebies, the Communications Minister, who, of course, is getting ready to ban kids from certain social media apps.
Stop scrolling. The Albanese government's social media laws kick in on 10 December, but what does that mean for you?
Don't you love? These people are obsessed with their own social media profile. Oh, but for the betterment of the kids, we're going to, please, talk about the bet each way.